Well, it is October after all. Oh. And there are some scary things that happen in October. Microphones get pulled up. Clowns go around town. I don't know what's going on with that. You think about October, you think about spooky stuff. And so I thought, well, I need a spooky series. Not really. I'm going to start a series that's a little bit different called Scary Good Theology. Theology so good, it's almost frightening. Thoughts so profound, it's almost scary. And so I've got this great comic. It's one of my favorite comics from the Peanuts collection on the cover of your bulletin. And I'll leave it up to you to read, but the long and the short of it is, Lucy looks out and says, boy, you know, it's raining, what if it floods? And Linus quotes from Genesis and says, it's never going to happen again. And she says, you've taken a great load off my mind. And he kind of confidently says, yeah, theology has a way of doing that. And so part of the reason I'm doing this series, Scary Good Theology, is to help take a load off your mind. I think that sometimes it's not the actual content, the direct words of the Bible. Sometimes it's not those that make a difference, but the picture they paint of God and how God works with us. And so the series will be a little bit different because I'm not necessarily going to settle in one passage, in one story, and try and draw out what that means and how to apply it. It's going to be a little less application specific, but it should give you a little bit larger frame to look at the world through, to look at God through, and to think about how do these things matter between God and the world. And today, I'm drawing from C.S. Lewis. He was a great Christian thinker, great story writer. In his stories, he often included analogies as to how Christ worked and how God played out. And the thought that he starts out with comes from Matthew 5:48. And it's one of the more troubling verses that you'll find in Scripture. Matthew 5:48 says this, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I think we can read that verse, we can hear it and go, that is a tall order. Be perfect as God is perfect. Well, only Pastor Devin can do that. Hey, I know. Oh, come on. Everybody likes blasphemy on a Sunday morning, please. Be perfect as your Father is perfect. A lot of us hear that, and what we hear in it is God saying, I will not help you unless you are perfect. And we go, well, that sucks, because I'm not there. I mean, if we're honest about it. We hear, unless you are perfect, I will not help you. And C.S. Lewis takes it, and he turns that and says, you're hearing it wrong. He says, rather, it's God saying, the only help I'm going to give you is in becoming perfect. Nothing short of that. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. I went back to the original Koine Greek and I did my best to look at what that meant, and it was, you shall be perfect, as Jesus was talking, as your Father in heaven is perfect. Jesus saying, you will be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And again, so it's not that I won't help you unless you're perfect or until you're perfect. It's if I'm going to help you. Jesus is saying the type of help that I will give you is to make you nothing short of perfect. So think about it this way, just as a way to help get your mind going. A few months ago, Jen and her erratic driving habits, she was coming back from Logansport where she had had a shift, and if you've ever ridden with Jen, you've shortened your life expectancy. She is a maniac on the road. I'm joking. She's not in here. I could do this all morning. Like if she were sitting right there, I wouldn't have said any of that. She just puts it in neutral, like revs the engine, hits the gas hard enough when she's in drive. The tires, we drive a minivan, folks. Okay, nonetheless, I digress. Okay, but Jen was coming back from Logansport, and she was crossing the new Highway 25. You know, she needed to turn left, so she gets halfway out, and she stops, and she was going to go and finish the left turn, and she saw an oncoming car. And so she, did that quick start and stop. The dump truck behind her decided he was just going to go. And 1 + 1 did not add up to 2. So, the rear end of our minivan was no more. And I was thinking, Jen, texted me immediately, and I said, did you call the police? She's like, yeah, they're coming real fast. And she was okay, and that was the good news. Driver of the dump truck was fine. He just had a bunch of minivan on his grill. And I said, all right, well, let them fill out the paperwork, and as long as you're all right, is it drivable? Yes, drivable. Then come on home. I saw it, and I took a look at it, and I'm like, what did you do? No, again. I wouldn't be here this morning. Okay, so I look at the back of it, and it's pretty messed up. But I'm like, well, that probably affected in my great automechanical wisdom, in my plethora of knowledge in the area, right? From my perspective, I was like, that probably messed with the hatch. I'll probably have to fix that, the door that opens. I can see that, the paneling isn't there. I'm guessing they'll have to fix that. And then the bumper underneath, that got all goofed up, and you need that bumper so that when a truck hits you, it doesn't, well, it just did anyway. So I'm like, okay, we're going to fix, the paneling, and we'll fix the bumper, and we're going to fix that door, and we'll probably be good to go, not too bad. And we took it in, and they're like, here's a list of what's wrong. Not all inclusive or exhaustive, but these are the big things. The bumper is indeed messed up. We're going to have to take it off, put a new one on. Along with that, that's where your rear backing sensors are, Mr. Cook. Those are totally disabled. You need new rear backing sensors. The back panel on this side and this side and this side, those are all messed up. We have to take them off, completely redo them. That door will never work again in its current state. We have to put a new lift in, and we're going to have to put a new door on. The exhaust was affected. It was underneath there. It used to let your emissions out. It doesn't do that anymore. You need a new exhaust. The air conditioning has a back module that was crunched forward. You would only have air conditioning in the front. We're going to have to redo the rear section of the air conditioning. Your rear tires are completely misaligned. We're going to have to adjust the axle, realign the tires, put new tires on. The signal's out, the brake light's out, the gas tank seal is broken. The vehicle logo and the license plate all need to be repaired. Well, that's a bit more than I anticipated. But from my perspective, I only saw what was immediately apparent that needed to be done, right? I could see so much that I was like, this will have to be addressed. They're like, ha 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 ha. This will have to be addressed. Okay, here's what I want to do with that thought. Sometimes, sticking with that, God will make you perfect. Sometimes we come to God and we say, I have this one bad habit, God, that I need help with. See, I've looked at my life and I've found this area that I need to work on, so God, I need you to help me with it. And it can be very sincere. It can be a very earnest plea, God, this is where I want you to work in my life. And God sees that along with all the other items that need to be repaired. Sometimes we're aware of them and we don't want to admit. Sometimes we're completely not aware, but God says, oh, I will help you all right. But do you realize what that help is going to cost you? Because there are a lot of things to work on in your life, and even some areas you might say are really good. I think God says to us, I don't want you to be good. I want you to be perfect. So we're going to have to work on a lot more areas than you're aware of. I believe that God helps us when we come to Him in whatever situation. Maybe we're grieving the loss of a loved one, and we say, God, I can't find peace. Right now, I just can't settle my soul. I need your help. God says, I will give you peace. And I'm going to take you a step further. Sometimes, like I said, it's one particular thing that nags at us. We all have certain areas we struggle with. God says, I will help you with that. And if you'll come along, I'll take you a lot further. Sometimes it's a physical ailment. Sometimes it's just an emotional funk that we're in. It's a whole variety of things, but we come to God with one area and we say, God, we want you to work on this. And God says, I will definitely help you work on that. But if you want to come on this journey with me, I will conform you into my image. I will help to make you perfect. As God helps us, as God works on the area we bring to Him, He's not satisfied to leave us in that state. God is not satisfied just to take the one area and redo it and let us off, short of being perfect. God works with us through an entire lifetime to perfect us, because nothing less than perfect will do. I think God is pleased with every area that we do improve. If you say, I have an ill temper, God, please help me with my temper. And then God works with you. If you say, I need patience, God, give me more patience. Ha ha, joke's on you, but you get more patience. If you say, God, I need this or that, God is happy to give us that, but again, takes us so many steps further. Each step that we take, each item that is improved, each thing we bring forward and let God conform, God is very pleased with, but God is not satisfied because God wants nothing short of perfect, and he will work with us to make us perfect. George MacDonald was a great thinker and writer back in the late 1800s, and he said, God is very easy to please. Any little step that we recognize we need to turn over to God and improve on, God is easily pleased. He's very pleased with those steps, but he is hard to satisfy. In other words, God is never satisfied because we've taken a step. Yet I'll remind you again, just like when you see a child take their first step and you are thrilled with that step. Any good parent sees a child taking its first step, is thrilled, enamored, caught up in that step, and you say, that is wonderful. But would you be satisfied if that were the only step they ever took? No. You want the absolute best. You want the highest level of stepitude for that child. You want that child to walk as good and healthy as any child can walk. God wants nothing short of that for us. Each step pleases God. Yet God will not be satisfied until all our steps are perfect, which he will bring about in us. I'll be the judge of that. The problem is we want to become the judge of how we are doing and how others are doing. So if God's working to bring about perfection and make us whole, and again, whether you admit to it or not, inside each one of us is this terrible voice that decides where we are and where the person next to us is and where everyone that we meet is. And I think God would like to remain the judge in that position. The question that comes with it is usually, if God is working on all of us, okay, if those of us who choose to follow Christ are being molded into the likeness of Christ, then why in general aren't Christians better people than non-Christians? Why aren't I a better person because I'm a Christian? Why isn't that Christian better than that non-Christian that I know? That's the kind of questions, the line of questioning that comes along with this when we think about God working to make us better, indeed trying to work with us to be perfect. And what lies behind a question like that is a judgment of ourselves and others. Okay, when we ask, why aren't I more even-tempered? Why do I still give in to this temptation? Why do they keep doing this? Why isn't this or that person nicer? When we ask those questions, we're making ourselves the ultimate evaluator, the ultimate judge of where we ought to be and where someone else ought to be. We tend to judge others or compare ourselves to others, and in that way we end up hurting ourselves. So imagine one person who does not follow Jesus, but is a very nice person. We'll call him Bob. Okay? Imagine Bob does not follow Jesus, but is a very nice person, very well respected. Everybody likes Bob, okay? And now imagine another person who is following Jesus, but they don't strike you as living it in every way. You look at them, you're like, yeah, but aren't they a Christian? Aren't Christians supposed to? And they just don't seem to live up to it. We'll call that person Josh. So Josh is following Christ's command as best as Josh can. But sometimes you look at Josh's life and you wonder, really? Really? And Bob is not following Christ at all, and yet Bob, again, is so well respected and well liked and is a nice person. You would be tempted, if you're Josh, to say, I'm trying to follow Christ. I am trying to live in Jesus' ways, and yet I'm not even as good as Bob. And you'd want to throw in the towel by comparison. If you were Josh and you were following Jesus and you were trying to live like Jesus, but you look at Bob's life and Bob seems to have it all together, you might be tempted to just, I'm done. That's it. Why am I trying this? What good is it doing? On the other hand, if you were Bob, you might be tempted to say, I get along with most everybody. People seem to respect me. They seem to like me. That guy Josh is calling himself a Christian, but certainly it's not making a difference. I'm on the right track. Those are the two problems you can run into. It would be easy to get caught up in that and think of yourself, if you were Bob, as better than Josh. It would be easy if you were Josh to say, why aren't I better? Why aren't I as good as Bob? It would be easy to get caught up in all of that and think that the point was to be better. And that is not the point. But let me ask you a question at this. Who defines what better is? In each of those cases, Bob or Josh, one following Christ and one not, who decides what a right life looks like? Who determines what better is? Who among us knows exactly how far Josh has already come in his walk? Who among us knows what Josh looked like before, when he didn't submit any of his life to Christ? What he was dealing with, what he was doing, and how much better he looks. Josh may not be able to see it. We may not be able to see it. Why, therefore, would we try and make a judgment? Which one of you can say how good Bob could really be? I mean, sure, he's well-respected and well-liked and nice and everything, but who's to say how good Bob could really be if he chose to give himself over to Christ? If he chose to follow in Jesus' ways, if he chose to do the things that were honoring and pleasing to God, maybe Bob has miles and miles he could go. Bob may be a nice guy, but nice isn't the goal, remember? Nothing short of perfect is the goal. And God promises that if you let him, he will help you get there to perfect. The danger of Bob's situation is that he could easily fall into the temptation of thinking his niceness and his popularity is enough. And more than that, it is the right road. Because he is well-liked, because he gets along with others, Bob could say, I am on the right path, I don't need this Jesus stuff, and that is dangerous. You see what that can lead to? Making an idol out of yourself. I don't need God. God does not work. I have these things in me innately. What do I need God for? That's the danger with Bob's situation. Josh, on the other hand, could say, I'm just not good enough. And once again, good enough only happens over a lifetime with God working with you. Josh could throw in the towel and say, I've been following Jesus this far, but Bob, he's so much better a person. And it would be easy once again to give up or keep beating himself up because he's comparing himself. Who's the ultimate judge? It's God. Only God knows what Bob could be and what Josh will be. Only God knows what he could make of each of these lives. Only God can see what they will be someday when they continue to look at where they are now and sometimes compare what they are now. Jesus constantly found himself in the presence of tax collectors, thieves, of sinners, of prostitutes, of people who were rebellious, people that wanted to lead a violent revolution, and he called some of those people his disciples. That was one of the problems. People looked at who Jesus kept company with and said, what on earth is he doing? This Jesus guy, he can't be any good because he's got a group of bandits and druggies and sinners and thugs with him. Jesus, what are you doing? And when I think about it, I think any day of the week, God is more pleased with a tax collector, with a sinner, with a thug, with a druggie or a prostitute who chooses to take a step than a person who leads a relatively clean life and says, I'm all that I need and I'm good enough right here. I think in both cases, Jesus would say, you will be perfect if you will allow me to work with you. And the one that says, I'm good enough where I'm at is in a greater danger than the one that continues to take steps, even though they've started this far behind. So I want to leave you with a couple scriptures, and I want you to think on these. 1 John chapter 3 says, Dear friends, now we are children of God. He was speaking to a group of believers. When John wrote this, he was speaking as an elder to a group of young Christians, people that were following Christ. And he says to them, now we are children of God. In other words, in your current state, those of you that believe, you are children of God. God welcomes you. You are part of his family. Now you are children of God. And what will be has not yet been made known. In other words, you are children of God already, but what you are going to be, what God is making out of you, what you're being formed into, it's not yet known. But when Christ appears, we will be like him, and we will see him as he is. That's a great thought from 1 John chapter 3. So for those of you that are following in Jesus' ways, right now you are children of God no matter where you're at. But what you are becoming, you cannot see. Trust that in time, God will make you into that. To give you one last story, I think of my friend growing up. His name was Corey, and Corey had a great deal of skill with automobiles. He knew things and talked about parts of cars I didn't know existed. Steering wheel, what? What is that? He bought this car. He was so proud of his car. He bought this car, and he was telling us all about it. We couldn't wait to see it. He had worked a job and saved from this job and took another job so he could buy his own car. And he used to drive one his parents had, and it wasn't real nice, but that's where the rest of us were anyway. But Corey talked, I've been saving all summer, guys. Wait until the first day of school. I can't wait for you to see my car. And he drives like this beater of a car. I'll just go, he's like, hey, Corey, you saved all summer for that. It's very nice. And you looked at it, and it wasn't impressive to the eye, and I don't know, again, obviously a lot about automobiles, but like this was his thing. He's like, this is so awesome, and he tells you all about it. And the only thing I got out of it was a classic car, I think from the 60s. Again, I'm not good. But he's like, it's a classic. Okay, these things are awesome. They're beautiful. I'm like, congratulations. And I didn't feel so bad about like the one my mom and dad had given me to drive. And he says, I'm going to work on it and I'm going to restore it. And I'm like, hey, you do that. If I can help, maybe I'll learn a thing or two. And sometimes he would work on that and I wasn't around. He did a lot of work. That's how he spent his spare time because he loved cars. And sometimes I get to be there. I remember going to the junkyard. He's like, we're after a specific part. And he'd give me a list from the junkyard. And he's like, find this and we'll go pay. Okay, whatever. Anyway, over the series of 2 years, Corey worked on his car, and sometimes, again, it was stuff that made sense to me. Like the lining inside on the ceiling was all drooping down and hanging down. I knew that needed to be replaced. Okay, sometimes it was chrome strips on the outside, and I'd be like, what do you want to do on your car today? And he'd hand me this big wedge. He'd be like, rip these off. I'm like, what? That car not real nice as it is. You're going to destroy it further? He'd be like, rip this off. And he'd go find this new chrome strip, or he'd order, or he'd get from another car. 2 years later, Corey had a beautiful and fully restored, just absolutely perfect. He pulled it up to school, and the engine was still very loud. It had kind of a different sound. It was powerful. I'm like, oh. I remember thinking back, like when he first drove it, and it was close to our senior year, and it was done. He's like, look at this. I'm like, yeah. I couldn't even see that. There's no way in the world from the time he first bought that car, the time he drove it up to school fully restored, there's no way in the world I could have conceived it was ever going to be. And it was beautiful. It was a classic, and it had, I can still remember, like the phrase, okay, it doesn't mean a lot to me, I can still remember it had a 310 Wildcat engine. Corey's like, I'm going to take you for a ride after school. Okay, right in front of the school. Like, oh. Pretty sure the officers park a block down, but hey, it was amazing. His car was amazing. Corey could see that. When he bought it, he knew exactly what he wanted. He knew exactly what to look for. And the simple repairs had to be done, and the really big, like tear it apart repairs had to be done, but he knew what he was working toward. And at any point, he could have said, well, I got, like the new rear blinker on it. We're going to stop there. And it wouldn't have been his dream car. He could have said, I'm going to touch up the paint on it. We're stopped there, and it wouldn't have been his dream car. He could have said, I'm going to restore the interior and leave the exterior. I'm going to leave the engine. Any point he could have stopped, it would have been better. But better was never Corey's goal. Corey wanted that fully restored, absolutely beautiful, perfect car with a 310 Wildcat engine driving down the road. And he got there. And it was a process. And I could never have seen or imagined what it would have taken and what it would have been. God is doing the same in you. So, dear friends, right now, you are children of God if you choose to follow God. What will be is not yet known. But we know when Christ appears, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. So be confident in this. Back to the biblical focus on the front of your bulletins. Be confident in this. In other words, no matter where you find yourself, if you will give what you are over to God, be confident in this. The one who started a good work in you will stay with you to complete it by the day of Christ. The one who started, in other words, the minute you said to God, I need help with, you began a journey and he said, I will help you, but I will lead you to perfection. The one who started that work in you will stay with you to complete the job by the day of Christ.